Hello there, welcome to lesson number 7 in our series on creating lampshades using FluidDesigner for 3D printing. Today's lesson we want to show you how you can create a simple lampshade, a spherical one, and we're going to introduce you to the box select and the circle select commands. So if you start off FluidDesigner, we first of all need to go to Learning Projects, Lighting Projects. And we're doing lesson number 7, so it's 07, it's a spherical lampshade. I'm just going to switch on the screencast key, so any key presses I make should be displayed down here. And this is the lampshade that we're going to create in today's lesson. It's quite simple. Well, let's, one of the things I should point out is that it's a bit chunky, the actual style of this at the moment. If it was printed as a solid. That's because there are not that many faces on the object. Now the only reason that it's not smoother is that we, when we distribute this application, we didn't want to make the file size too massive, and the more faces we have on an object, the bigger the file size. So that's the only real reason why it's a little bit chunky like that. So how are we going to create it? Well, we're going to do add a mesh and then add a UV sphere. So if we go to add mesh and a UV sphere, now as you can see the object is pretty small, so if we just go to view and zoom to selected, well, it is a sphere, and as you can see when we zoom in it has got quite a chunky sort of look to it. But it's only 2 by 2 by 2 millimeters at the moment, so if I just scroll the center mouse button and zoom out, go back to the view of the finished object, what we need to do is we need to increase the size of this object, and we can do that in FluidDesigner by scaling it up. And we scale in FluidDesigner by pressing the S key on the keyboard. Now we could drag the mouse out until we get it to a size we want, or we could enter in a value. Now at the moment, if you look up in the top, if you look at the top of the window, you just look up there, you can see what the scale factor is at any one point at the top. Not easy for me to point the mouse up there. It's 170 scale factor at the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually type in 100 on the keyboard, and you can see on the top that it says 100 right across for X, Y and Z scale. And so if I press enter there, that will scale it up by exactly 100. So these values were 2 millimeters, 2 millimeters and 2 millimeters. They're now 200 millimeters. They're 100 times bigger. Now whenever you apply a scale like that whenever you use a scale factor like that in FluidDesigner, you must always reset the scale. And we do that by doing Control A and applying the scale. Now if we don't do that, we could end up with printing problems. Okay, so there's our sphere, which is looking a little bit like the finished object down here. But what we need to do now is to chop off the bottom and create a hole in the top. So if I go to view and view it from the front, and if I just zoom in now, I'm just scrolling the center mouse button. What I want to do is to chop off a part of the bottom of this sphere. So first of all, I need to press the tab key to go into edit mode. Now at the moment, as you can see, all the vertices, all the dots here of this particular sphere are highlighted. And the way to deselect them all is the A key on the keyboard. So A selects all the vertices, or all of the object, and A deselects all. We could also do it from this command up here on the menu, select, toggle deselect, toggle deselect. So that does the same thing. Now it doesn't say A next to this, but it does say B and C. And we're going to use these two select commands in this lesson. So we want to delete the bottom part of this object, so we could go to select border select, or we could simply just press B on the keyboard and it will do the same thing. And then we get some crosshairs. So what we need to do is highlight the bit that we want to delete, and then hit the X key on the keyboard, and we're going to delete the vertices in this instance. Now you can see it hasn't quite deleted everything, it's only deleted the vertices at the front. So if we just go to view and front again, if we just repeat that, so it's select, border select, and this time I want to highlight to there, and then X to delete those vertices. So you can see there I've chopped off the bottom part of this mesh. And I could have done that. I could have done border select by pressing the B key on the keyboard. So that will allow me to border select. Now I don't want to delete anything anymore, so I'm just going to press A to deselect. So it's either select, border select, or it's B on the keyboard. So A is to select all, B is border select. And the next one that we're going to do is the circle select, because what we need to do is we need to create a hole in the top of the mesh. So what we need to do is to go to view and view it from the top. And if we just zoom in, okay, if we try doing border select here, it's actually a little bit, well, that's not too bad. It's a little bit messy to do, because if you look carefully, I've actually selected that vertices there. So if I try deleting at the moment, I wouldn't just delete this bit in the middle, I'd delete that vertices, and things would start to look really strange. So border select is not a good way of doing it for a circular object. So if I just press A to deselect, what I really ought to do is to use circle select. Now when we get circle select, you can see I've got a circle on the screen as a cursor now. And if I roll the center mouse button in and out, I can change the size of that circle. And that's what you need to do first of all, change the size of the circle, because I need to put a circle around all those vertices there, and when I click the mouse, the left mouse button, there's not really any chance of me selecting any of the vertices out here. Not with a circle. It's a bit more difficult with a box or border select. Now to cancel the circle and then to complete the deletion, I must press the escape key on the keyboard. You must press escape on the keyboard to get rid of that. Now we want to delete these inner part of the object, so it's X on the keyboard and delete the vertices. Now when I delete the vertices, notice the size of the hole that I get. View it from the top again. Now that's actually a bigger hole than the one at the bottom, so I've actually deleted more than I wanted to, really. So if I just go to edit and undo, okay, so I really want to just delete these faces inside this circle. So if I press A to deselect again, and if I right click the mouse button, if I change my selection mode to face select, and then if I go to circle select again, and this time I want to get my circle inside where it was before, and I'm just going to select those faces this time, and then press the escape key to cancel the circle select. I haven't selected the vertices here, so when I delete this time, it won't delete these faces outside, which is what it did the last time. So if I press X on the keyboard and delete the faces this time, you'll see that I've now got a hole that's the same size as the finished object at the bottom. So you do need to just sort of play around and see what the difference is between deleting faces and deleting vertices, because it will affect how much is actually deleted. So that's it. That's the only changes I want to make in terms of deleting faces and vertices on the object. So I can now come out of edit mode by pressing the tab key on the keyboard. So the final thing that I want to do, I'll just scroll down and just double check. Yeah, I want a thickness of 3 millimeters for this object now, because as is usual with these things, this is just a shell. So it's got no thickness at the moment, this object. So we need to apply a thickness, and we do that by using a modifier, the solidify modifier. And I'm going to apply a thickness of 1, 2, 3 millimeters. And if we zoom in, you can see that better. So let me just set it back to 0. So 1, 2, 3 millimeters. And we're going to tick an even thickness. And that's it. Now we're not going to worry too much about whether it goes inside or outside in terms of the offset. So that's it. That's we've replicated our mesh now. And what we do need to do is to confirm this solidify modifier, and we always do that in FluidDesigner by going to Tools, Object Tools, and converting it to a mesh. So we can now delete the original object, X on the keyboard, and delete it. And the one that we've created in today's lesson, we can save it. And as usual in FluidDesigner, we go to File and Save As. This is what we recommend. And go up through the menu system, go to My Projects, Lighting Projects, and we save it as 07 as a spherical lampshade. And we save that as a Blender file. And we can't print Blender files, so we need to go to File and Export, and we're going to save it as a wavefront object this time. And we save them to the desktop, so it's 07 spherical lampshade object file. So we export that to the desktop. And as is normal, we would go to Netfab Basic, go to Project and Open, go to the desktop and open up the spherical lampshade and just see whether there are any issues with it. No, that seems okay, but we would always recommend you go to Extras and repair the part. Netfab will triangulate the mesh and analyze it, and if we just click Update, yeah, you can see there are no problems here. There are no border edge, no orientation, no holes. There's just one shell, but just run automatic repair and just apply the repair. And so there's your finished mesh. It's been checked by Netfab Basic. All you need to do now is to go to Part, export the part as a wavefront object, export it to the desktop as a spherical lampshade repaired. So you just save that, and that's your printable file format now. Now, as we said earlier, this is quite a chunky mesh at the moment, this one, and we did that deliberately because when we distribute the application, whoops, we don't want the file size too big. But if we actually just pop back to FluidDesigner, if we look at the mesh that we've created here, in the top of the screen you can see it's made up of 640 faces, which is actually very low indeed. So we could smooth off this object. So let me just switch it to wireframe first of all, wireframe view. It's not a wireframe object, it's just a wireframe view. We could increase the number of faces here and smooth off this object by adding a modifier. And if we add the modifier, the subsurf modifier, you'll notice the mesh changes, and up here the number of faces is now 2560. And if we just switch to material mode, you can see already it's looking quite a bit smoother. Now if you change the view value to 2, the faces go up to 10,000, 3 they go up to 40,000, 4 163,000. Now if you go much above that, you're probably not going to find that it'll print, certainly not at printers like Shapeways for example. But by changing this, by applying this subsurf and changing the view value, you can increase the number of faces and smooth off this object. So if we look at wireframe, you'll see there's really a lot of wires to the frame here. So we go back to material mode. So yeah, that's just one way of actually smoothing off this oh dear me, I keep hitting the wrong button. It's one way of smoothing off this object would be to add a subsurf modifier. But there is an issue with this. If you do go to Tools, Object Tools, and convert this to a mesh, the file size will increase quite dramatically. Okay, so that's just one thing to note there. Okay, so that's the end of this lesson. Thank you.